The moment my husband walked out the door that night, my brother-in-law looked at me with a strange, urgent expression, pressed a hotel keycard into my hand, and told me to stay there and never come home, because if I did, I would lose my life. I thought it was some sick joke from a man fresh out of prison. I was wrong, and what happened next tore my entire marriage apart at the seams. My name is Sophie, and dinner in my husband's family estate on Long Island was always heavy as lead. The silverware clinked against fine china while I kept my eyes down, swallowing food I could barely taste, feeling the weight of everyone's judgment pressing on my shoulders the way it had for years. My mother-in-law, Margaret, slammed her fork down that night, sneering that my cooking was garbage and that I was still just a useless small-town nobody a decade into this marriage. My husband Derek did not even look up from his phone, waving her off with the same tired irritation he always used, never once defending me the way he used to in our first year together, back when he would drive across town in a storm just to bring me coffee and tell me I was the only thing that made his long days worth it. That warmth had quietly disappeared somewhere between his firm's first big contract and the night his voice started dropping to a near whisper whenever a man named Victor called his cell, a name that always made Margaret suddenly change the subject and busy herself with something else at the table. The person who truly frightened me was Cole, my brother-in-law, who had come home from federal prison 3 months earlier for what the family vaguely called a bar fight, watching me across the table with a cold, calculating stare that felt nothing like curiosity. Derek left for an urgent meeting with Victor, the same partner I had never once been allowed to meet, despite him controlling half our household income. And Margaret left soon after for a charity gala, leaving Cole and me alone in that enormous silent house. While I washed dishes, Cole appeared behind me so suddenly I dropped a plate, and when I spun around, his eyes were locked not on my face, but on the diamond necklace Derek had given me for our anniversary. He said quietly that he knew exactly what it cost, and that he also knew its real purpose, because Derek was using me as collateral. Collateral for what? I demanded, my back against the counter. But Cole only pressed a hotel keycard into my palm and told me to go to room 1818 at the Grand Plaza and stay there, because by midnight this house would no longer be my home. I locked myself in my room, terrified, trying to decide if this was a trap or a warning. Derek's phone went straight to voicemail. Margaret was unreachable at her gala. I packed a small bag, grabbed the necklace on instinct, and slipped out of the dark, silent mansion into a waiting cab, giving my friend Jenna's address as a cover story before changing my mind halfway there and redirecting straight to the Grand Plaza instead, trusting the only instruction I had been given. Room 18 turned out to be a massive presidential suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city skyline. And instead of feeling safe, the sheer luxury only deepened my dread, because I could not understand how an ex-convict could possibly afford a room like this. I searched every corner for hidden cameras, checked behind the television and under the bed frame, wedged a heavy armchair against the door, and sat curled on the sofa all night with the lights off, replaying the decade that had led me here. The unexplained cash Derek kept in a locked drawer in his home office. The second phone he thought I never noticed charging inside his gym bag. The lavish gifts that arrived with no birthday or anniversary attached to explain them. Around 1 a.m, Derek called, drunk and irritated that I had run off, offering no concern for my safety, only annoyance that I was making a scene, and something inside me quietly finished dying in that moment. By morning, exhausted and feeling foolish, I went home ready to demand answers from Cole. The house was eerily normal. Margaret cooking breakfast and complaining that Derek had stumbled in drunk at 5 a.m., the smell of coffee and eggs filling the kitchen like any other ordinary Tuesday. I felt like an idiot, certain I had believed some dramatic prank, until I noticed a black sedan idling across the street that had not been there the night before. 2 men inside watching the house without pretending otherwise, and moments later the front door was kicked open as federal agents in tactical vests flooded in, a K-9 unit dragging a trained dog straight toward the staircase, while neighbors already gathered on their lawns in bathrobes to watch through the hedges. Derek stumbled out of the bedroom, pale and sweating, as agents tore the master bedroom apart, drawers dumped onto the floor and mattresses flipped against the wall. And minutes later, one agent walked down the stairs carrying a bag containing 5 pounds of pure cocaine hidden beneath our bed. The exact bed I would have been sleeping in if I had ignored Cole's warning. Margaret collapsed unconscious onto the kitchen tile, and Derek was handcuffed sobbing that he had been framed, while I stood frozen in the doorway, my whole body shaking, finally understanding that Cole had told me the truth. When Cole returned hours later, calm and unreadable, I demanded to know everything. He told me that his own 2 years in prison had not been for a bar fight, but for the exact same trafficking charge Derek now faced. That at 19, he had been used as a disposable driver by a crew working for Victor, arrested with product he never knew was in the trunk, handed a plea deal by a public defender who barely remembered his name. He said that when he tried to explain it to this family from behind glass in a visiting room, Margaret had refused to even come see him, telling relatives at church that her real son was an only child now, and that Derek had visited exactly twice in 2 years, both times cutting the conversation short because he was worried about being seen. The necklace around my neck, Cole explained, his voice dropping lower, was not just a gift. It was a marker Victor gave to men he owned, proof that Derek had used my safety as collateral in a deal that had finally gone bad, the same way Cole's own freedom had once been collateral for someone else's greed. Our lawyer soon confirmed the worst. Agents had found ledgers in Derek's office in his own handwriting tracking cash payments that matched deposits into an account under Victor's construction firm. Evidence strong enough that the FBI was already building a separate money laundering case against Victor himself. I begged Cole to help, not for Derek's sake but for my own survival and Margaret's, and after a long, heavy silence, he agreed. He explained that Victor's own accountant, a nervous man named Preston who had been quietly panicking for weeks, had already started cooperating with investigators to save himself from prosecution, but was still holding back the most damaging details out of fear of retaliation. Cole reached out through an old contact still owed him a favor from prison, a former bookkeeper who had worked adjacent to Victor's crew years earlier, and within 2 days she handed over recordings she had secretly kept as insurance, one of which captured Victor's own voice threatening to have my life ruined and Margaret's health destroyed if Derek refused a shipment. Hidden in a rundown diner, we listened to it together, my hands shaking, hearing this man calmly discuss burying my husband, and by extension me, without a flicker of hesitation in his voice. Cole took the recording straight to the same federal agent handling Derek's case, and once Preston learned the recording existed, terrified of being charged as an accessory to witness intimidation on top of everything else, he finally agreed to hand over the full financial trail he had been sitting on. With that recording, Preston's complete cooperation, and the ledgers already pulled from Derek's office, the FBI moved fast, arresting Victor within the week on federal trafficking and witness intimidation charges, facing a mountain of financial records his own staff had surrendered, plus a recorded threat against my family that any jury would find impossible to forgive. Victor accepted a plea deal rather than risk trial, publicly admitting he had orchestrated the entire operation and confirming that Derek had acted under coercion after trying repeatedly to walk away months earlier. At his sentencing, Victor received life without parole. Derek, coerced but still guilty of years of laundering, was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison, a fraction of what he could have faced. I visited him once behind a plexiglass divider, not as his wife but to hand him divorce papers. And for a moment I let myself remember the version of him who used to hold my hand through every terrifying moment of our first year together, back when he had nothing but ambition and warmth and a habit of showing up soaked from the rain just to make sure I was not alone. That memory sat heavy in my chest as I slid the papers through the slot and watched him sign with a trembling hand, apologizing for letting greed and fear blind him to everything that had once mattered, his voice cracking as he asked how his mother was doing, unable to look me in the eye for more than a few seconds at a time. Margaret's health and mind never fully recovered from the shock of that morning, and I settled her into an assisted living home in Connecticut, where she sometimes recognizes me and grips my hand asking me to save her son, and other times looks at me blankly and asks if I have seen Derek, certain he is simply away on a business trip and will be home any day now. I moved into a small apartment in Queens, returned to the accounting career I had abandoned the year I got married, and slowly rebuilt a quiet, steady life out of the wreckage. Before Cole left the city to start over quietly on the West Coast, we met one last time at a diner and he thanked me of all things, for once handing him an extra piece of chicken at a dinner table where nobody else would even look at him, a small unconscious kindness I barely remembered giving. Walking home that evening under a sky turning gold, I realized I had lost a marriage, a mansion, and a life built on money I never truly understood. But I had finally found the one thing that mattered most: myself. If this story hit you the way it hit me writing it down, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because Revenge Tales has a lot more stories just like this one coming your way. And you do not want to miss what happens next.